Hello and welcome to Bright Wings, children's books to make the heart soar. I am your host, Charity Hill. The purpose of this conversation is to help mothers and fathers identify books that will liberate their children to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty. I'm really happy to share with you an interview and a conversation with Vivian Dudro. She is the senior editor at Ignatius Press, who collaborates to produce children's books. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you so much.
So I am really curious, what is your role at Ignatius Press like? What do you love about your work?
My role is, my official title is senior editor, but that role involves a lot of different things, including acquisitions, editing of books, and then sort of shepherding books through the publishing process, specifically with regard to the children's books that we publish with Magnificat. I am in that same kind of role, acquisitions and then editorial work and then editorial review of other editors until the books are ready to go to print.
Acquisitions, Does that mean people approach Ignatius Press or Magnificat with books they'd like to have published, and then you get to decide, Vivian?
Yes, not myself alone. A team of people review things to see if we want to publish them. Some of these works are being submitted by the authors themselves. And some of these works are, Magnificat has a parent company in France called MOM, and they have a very big, highly developed children's wing or department. And so many of the works that we do with Magnificat, in fact, that's how we got started in the first place. Magnificat approached us saying, Mom in France has these gorgeous children's books. Maybe you'd like to publish English versions with us. And we said yes. And that's how the whole ball got rolling. And so we still, if you look on the copyright pages, you'll see which books have come from Mom. Those went through a translation process and then a review process, an editorial process. And then now that we're known as being publishers of children's books, now a lot of domestic authors are coming to us with their works, asking us to publish them.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then we
I
kind
think I
tracked
clued
down
in to the fact that some of the works were in translation. My children were reading with their daddy, A Lion for the Emperor, I think is one of the ones that has come from France and been translated. And those are pretty adventuresome.
Those are very adventuresome. I call those sort of like Hardy Boys set during the persecution of Diocletian. Yeah, that because it's this group of boys. Each story, they're sleuthing some kind of a mystery, a crime that has occurred or something they can't seem to figure out. And they get involved and all these madcap adventures happen. But the serious underlying theme of all the stories, there's, I think, maybe five or six volumes in this Shadows of Rome series written by Sophie de Molenheim. Every story has a kind of madcap adventure, sleuthing angle, but also there's a development of faith happening because the boys themselves are not Christians, but in each story they somehow encounter Christians, and this encounter of this other faith starts to change how these boys think about life, themselves. And so that's the faith dimension, which makes them interesting for us as a Catholic publisher. Everything that we publish has to have some kind of faith dimension.
Yeah, those books are pretty exciting bedtime reading. We've been like reconsidering whether they're like, they always want to keep reading because the chapters end on cliffhangers, just like those Hardy Boys books you brought up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that your children are enjoying them because we really enjoyed working on them. And so that's great.
Yes, I think we've gotten through 2 of them so far. I don't know that we own all of them yet. So say a little more, please, Vivian, about what's distinctive about Ignatius Press. You're senior editor at Ignatius Press. And so maybe you could tell me something about how and why Ignatius Press started publishing. And then what do you see the relationship between their original mission and then their children's publishing? You kind of mentioned something about this, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Ignatius Press was started by Father Joseph Fessio, a Jesuit. When he returned from his theological studies in Europe, he studied under Joseph Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI, and Henri de Lubac, famous French Jesuit scholar, profound in his thinking, profound in his faith. He had a tremendous impact on Father Fessio personally, as well as intellectually. And also Hans Urs von Balthasar, who was a friend of both de Lubac and Ratzinger, and was recommended that he do his doctoral work on works of Hans Urs von Balthasar. So Father Fessio comes back from Europe with this very rich Catholic intellectual tradition, is a bit sad, dismayed, disappointed to see the sort of level of theology being done in America at that time when he comes back from these studies. He starts teaching as a professor at the University of San Francisco, a Jesuit university, and also sees, theology going in different directions from the one that the ship of Peter has been steering. And so he wants to also start to publish books to get into translations into English from French, de Lubac, and German, Ratzinger and von Balthasar. And that was why Ignatius Press got started. And so over time,
to bring really rich thinking to the United States so they can have access to this wealth.
Yes, and rich thinking in deep communion with the church. A key word here is communion with the church, with yes, with her tradition, and yes, with her teaching, and also yes, with lived Christian experience. That's really key. This is theology on the knees. This is not just, even though sometimes these books, people might feel some of them over their heads or it's not for them, that's fine. But what you have to understand about these men that Father studied with and the man that Father decided he wanted to become and the kinds of books that we publish and why we publish them, the key word, I think, is communion. Is this in communion with the deep streams of the church's faith and tradition and lived experience as Christians? You could say anyway, when I'm looking at submissions, whether they're adult books or children books, these are the criteria I'm applying. Is this a lived Christian witness that I am experiencing and being enriched by reading this book?
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a criteria for evaluation. Talk to me, Vivian, about how children's books became a necessary part of the mission for Ignatius Press.
Well, Ignatius Press for a long time now has been publishing catechetical works for children. The Faith and Life series, maybe some people are familiar with that who are listening. We've been publishing that for decades. And now we've launched a whole new series called Word of Life, which is just getting off the ground, that we co-authored and published with the Augustine Institute, which maybe some of your listeners are familiar with the Augustine Institute. So we've been, doing children's books actually for a long time. But when Magnificat approached us saying, look, we have all these beautiful books from France, picture books, board books, Bibles, storybooks, would you like to publish these with us? We thought that it fit our mission quite well because we've always been interested in building up the faith of children, but we were thinking more along catechetical textbooks, not these kinds of books so much. It was a no-brainer when we started seeing these books. They were so beautiful, so beautifully written, so beautifully illustrated. Gosh, it was only a matter of translating them into English. What was not to like about this proposition from Magnificat, right? I mean, we started out just doing a few a year. Now we're doing like a dozen a year or more. And so it's just grown over the years as these books get out there and become popular, as you just described. You and your own family have been reading this Shadows of Rome series. So, as you know, word of mouth is the best advertising.
Yes. What are some particular books that you're excited about? You named quite a few. You said it started out just, a few books a year. Now you're really publishing more like maybe a dozen a year. What are some books that you're excited about?
There's a whole age range from toddlers all the way up to teens, right? So that's a big range. So I always get excited when we get the books for the younger people and I see how beautifully they're illustrated, as well as some kind of depth, Yes. That gets me excited. But now these novels for young teens, or even just teens, young or not, this is turning out to be a very fertile field of endeavor for us because a lot of Catholic families are looking for this kind of reading material for their tweens and teens, that is encouraging of faith and representing faith in a compelling way, yet fun to read. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, to both give an exciting story, an adventuresome story, and at the same time, give it a compelling faith witness that doesn't somehow, oh, brother, here comes the faith lesson and everything. I mean, it really, it's kind of hard to pull that
read
off.
that, right? No one's going to return to that.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to pick that one up again.
Exactly. No, this is a hard thing. This is a real art form in and of itself, to make compelling faith witnesses in fiction. So I'm very excited, and we're getting domestically grown authors, if you will. A teacher, Montessori teen adolescent program teacher, which is not very common in this country to have Montessori adolescent programs. But anyway, this gal who lives here in Northern California, who teaches at a school like that, she's written this novel we just published called Phelan, which is also set in ancient Rome, ancient Christian Rome. There's a difference. I mean, the Christian period is sort of late in the day for Rome, but so later antiquity. It's great. It's a great story. It's called Phelan and the Miracle Machines. And just last night, she sent me a proposal to do a sequel. So here's a homegrown American Catholic woman, turning into quite an author. And she's done a wonderful job. And the story, again, is exciting. The boy's a runaway slave from Britain. She knows quite a bit about history, or at least does a lot of research for these stories. And so it starts out with the battle of, the Romans suppressing the people of Queen Boudica. You ever heard of her?
Oh, yes. I love her. She's so fascinating. I don't know how to pronounce her name.
I don't either. But in any case, that's where the story begins, with this battle that these people get massacred, and this boy is among the captives who get taken and sold into slavery. And, he gets taken to first elsewhere in Britain, but then taken, so now he's on an odyssey in terms of venturing through the Roman world. He ends up in Alexandria, and at every step along the way, she's giving you, historical details without bogging down the story.
Right. You have to do that naturally.
And now again, a young person with no Christian background of his own encountering people of faith, but also just virtuous people who maybe have no faith at all. It's a great story. And we just came out with that. And now the author just last night sent us a proposal for a second story. So this to me is very exciting. I mean, I love picture books. But what's kind of exciting to me too is that this whole other genre of youth fiction written by Catholics is kind of coming up,
Yes. It's exciting to see that kind of development, a longer, more developed narrative in a sustained way, asking the great questions that
and really
that
interesting.
We all ask, right?
Yes,
but that are
and
particular really to the youth. Who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? What good must I do?
Yeah, and why does it matter what I do anyway? Why does my life even matter at all? Never mind what I do with it.
What a perfect way to start thinking, taking your questions to a book and exploring them with this slave boy from Britain.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's really great stuff. And yes, those questions are being asked. And here's a big, big difference between the other offerings for young people since the time I was a kid.
Yes.
They're laden with despair. And why is that? Because if your way of looking at the world is, no, it doesn't matter. No, we're just bags of moving molecules. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do. Make your own reality, make your own, whatever. And these stories have gotten, over time, since when I was a kid till now, they've just gotten darker and darker and darker. And this is what we're feeding the imaginations and souls of our children, just all this darkness and gloom and hopelessness. And no thanks. I don't need that. I need that like a bump in the head.
Yes, presenting an alternative worldview. Ignatius Press and Magnificat are presenting an alternative way of being in the world and looking at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet you can't be too obvious about it, right? You can't be lecturing about it.
It has to be inhabited, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what a good way to say it. Inhabited.
Really inhabited. It can't be clunky. Tell me more. Tell me more about the books that you're publishing this year that have come out already, or And well, you also have to tell me what's coming down the pike. So you have a lot to tell me.
Oh boy. Okay. Well,
Tell me some of your favorites, Vivian.
okay. Well, some of my favorites, anything by Mate Roche. Okay.
Okay.
She's a French mother. She studied psychology. She's an artist, so she writes and illustrates her own stories. And she does things for toddlers that I think are the best things out there, Catholic things out there. I mean, they're just, first of all, they're beautifully done. And she understands the psychology of a child, what colors, what faces attract children, all these simple representations of the Mass and prayer and faith and Bible stories. And they're just great. And she does forward books and also all the way up to picture books with, regular paper pages. And they're all beautiful. You cannot go wrong with anything by Mate Roche. Okay, I'm also a big fan of this Jean-Francois Kiefer, another French author, father, deacon, Catholic deacon, illustrator. He's the one who's done The Adventures of Lupio. I don't know if you've heard of those, The Adventures of Lupio, but they're comic book style. And they're just wonderful. Lupio is an orphaned boy who gets kind of fostered by St. Francis of Assisi. So this is set in Italy in the Middle Ages. And every story, Lupio
Obviously
is getting...
fiction.
Yes, fiction, of course. Every story, though, is based on accounts in either the biographies of St. Francis or the biographies of other saints of the time. I mean, this man has done his research too. So things that happen, tournaments and crusades and pilgrimages and thieves and fraudulent monks, there's all kinds of interesting things going on. And again, stories of that show compelling witnesses of faith. And Lupio is always being, in every story, he's kind of being confronted with sort of a moral challenge. Like, how is he going to act? Is he going to fight back, or is he going to hate, or is he going to resent, or is he going to feel sorry for himself? Or, I mean, these are the choices that we all face every day. And you're seeing this boy with these challenges. Okay, so that whole Lupio series is fantastic. And Kiefer has also done stories from the Bible, the Acts of the Apostles, the parables of Jesus, the miracles of Jesus. We've done his whole Bible. I mean, it's just all great. It's just great, great, great. And then another series I'm very excited about is the How to Handle My Emotions series. These authors...
We have those in our house. And every once in a while, there is a child in my family who gets them off the shelf and reads them and looks through them. This child is my 10-year-old daughter. And I'm really glad that she's reading them and reading them privately. It doesn't take me to read them to her. I love that she's getting them out. And I'm just hoping and praying, right, that she's reading through them and considering her own interior life. And surely this must be happening because that's why she's drawn to them. Right, Vivian? So sorry, I interrupted you to share with you already what they're impacting my family. So tell us.
That's so beautiful.
Tell the wider listeners about these books, Vivian.
So there's 4 books, each of them one of the 4 major emotions: sadness, joy, fear, and anger. Okay, these are emotions we all experience. And this is a team of 4 women, mothers, teachers, child psychologists, the anthropology of the human person at work here with the way they think about this. We all experience these emotions, and these emotions are not good or bad in and of themselves. It's what you do with these emotions that becomes the moral question. I'm angry. So what do I do with being angry? Do I hit back? Do I throw a temper tantrum? Or I'm sad. So what do? Go into a corner and mope by myself and sink deeper and deeper into this? I'm joyful, but do I exert that in such a way as to actually impinge on the space and feelings of other people? Like there could be an aggressive happiness that is insensitive to the people around you. Okay. Yeah. And then what was the other one? Fear. How do it's a situation I need to act, but I'm too afraid. I'm paralyzed. I'm paralyzed by fear. So in all of these, each book has 3 stories where a child is dealing with one of these emotions. And through the course of, and the setup of the story is completely believable. Like these are truly situations children will find themselves in. And then the authors, through the course of the story, the child is actually given strategies for dealing with these emotions. Like you're exuberant over getting a box of chocolates, so you run into your room and eat every one all by yourself? Or is there more joy in starting to give some of them away? Okay, a little girl is challenged with that scenario. So the strategy we're going to apply in this situation is generosity. So it's a virtue-based.
A virtue-based emotional strategy.
For every emotion, there are virtues we can engage to have that emotion lead us to good action.
Yeah. One thing I think that I appreciate about these books by what's the author? Or is it a team of authors?
It's a team of 4 authors.
Okay.
And but the how to handle if you want to look for them, How to Handle My Emotions series, or just the title, Joy, Fear, Anger, and Sadness. You look for those titles, you'll find these books. Anyway, go on.
One of the things I appreciate about them is that sometimes we psychologize separately from faith. And then these are arenas of our lives that are not, they don't permeate each other, right? But holiness is about integration and integrating our emotions so that all of us belongs to the Lord, and all of us is responding in a more and more integrated way to the circumstances. Like you said, the emotions don't have a moral status until we respond to them.
Correct.
And so, like we were saying with the historical fiction, I think these authors do a great job of not doing it in a clunky or preachy or irritating way, which is what I was afraid of when I received the books. I was like, oh, is this going to be too bossy or too, you know, when you would get those books in school where it's like learning is fun, or like math is awesome, and you're like, just don't try so hard to convince me. But these books are not that.
Right? Yes, I agree.
This is an attractive way to live. They present like, who wants to be afraid? No, like this is like, how could you deal with your fear? Like this is a strategy for dealing with your fear, right? It both sort of says this is a it's understandable that you would be afraid, but here's how you can respond instead.
That's right. Here's the fundamental premise of these books. We are supposed to listen to these emotional states.
Right. Yes, like discern them.
Exactly. We have to first listen. Oh gosh, I'm afraid, or oh gosh, I'm angry. Okay. So, all right, let me think about the situation I'm in that's arousing this emotional reaction. And let me think about what I can do about it if I just react without taking that step back. That's why these books can only be for children who are already at the age of reason, who can actually take a step back from their actions and think about them.
Recognize and be aware.
Yes, recognize that emotion, be aware of that emotion. And now sometimes when you're experiencing fear, it's completely reasonable for you to not do the thing you're afraid to do, because it would kill you,
Right.
So these emotions are here to help us. And anger too, it arouses in us an awareness of an injustice.
Right. And how important justice is, right? It's a fundamental human need. We all thirst for it.
Exactly.
Natural to us.
And then sadness is the response to a loss. Well, you wouldn't have a heart if you weren't sad if someone close to you died, or you lost a pet, or whatever. I mean, sadness is response to some kind of a loss, and then joy, the exultation of happiness over a good thing. I'm telling you, I'm learning more working on these children's books than I've learned from a lot of adult books. Okay. Just saying. So when I first got the pages for joy, I was thinking, well, why is this something that has to be dealt with? I didn't think about the fact that, an overexuberance can actually be insensitive. I'm over exuberant about being invited to the party, na 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 na, and the kid next to me wasn't invited.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Right.
So
it's always in relation. Yeah.
All of these are in relation. All of these have to do with, we're relating with other people here, and our actions impact other people. So choose your actions well so that you have a good impact on others, and you'll be in a better place yourself. You will be in a better place yourself. You'll be a happier person, a more integrated person yourself. And that's going to spill over into relationships with other people. These are just brilliant books, and they're short. These little stories are short. They aren't overbearing or overwhelming, but they really get you thinking. And you go away going, oh gosh, next time I get angry, the old counting to 10 trick really works. Taking a deep breath, really works. These are very simple things. I'm over exuberant. How about sharing? How about including that other person? These are things we actually can put into practice. Children can put these into practice.
Yes.
And if children can, we can too.
Yes. Let's hope so, eh? The lovely thing about these books dealing with my emotions is that it does give young children an opportunity to sit back and reflect on themselves, and gives them the concept and allows them to see, hey, here's somebody like me. I guess I could do what these kids in this book are doing. It gives them a concept to know what's possible so that they can desire something good with their emotions, to direct their emotions in a way that leads to happiness. Vivian, do you have another book or two that you want to tell me about? Are you allowed to give us a sneak peek into what is coming?
Well, yes. Okay, so something that's coming, Works by Corinna Turner. I don't know if anyone. This is a British author who's become very popular in England, and she writes fiction for tweens and teens. The first series of books of hers that we are starting to publish together with Magnificat is called her Friends in High Places series. And these are stories of tweens and teens, that age range, who, whatever the difficulties in life they're going through, she writes in a completely believable way. Like, these scenarios are things that kids that age actually have to deal with, and how a lived witness of what a friendship with a saint looks like, how it can develop naturally, organically. It's so beautifully done, and really, like, wow, I come away from every story with, yeah, we believe in this communion of saints thing as Catholics. We say that every time we say the creed on Sunday, that we believe in the communion of saints. Well, what is that? How do we experience that? How do we live that in our lives? In a very compelling way, she shows children undergoing this awareness of a particular saint whose life story somehow resonates with their own. So the first one we're doing is The Boy Who Knew Carlo Acutis.
Oh.
But this boy didn't know Carlo Acutis when Carlo Acutis was alive. This boy is a teen in England who's just gotten a diagnosis of leukemia. And for those of you who know the story of Carlo Acutis, he died of leukemia. And so this boy, who's from a Catholic family, but not devout, and they're not really, they're just cultural Catholics. That describes a lot of people. It can describe the same person at different times in his life, So he gradually comes to know the story of Carlo Acutis and starts to gradually develop a prayer life. And, to try to illustrate a teen boy developing a prayer life and a relationship with a saint, I mean, to pull this off is real genius, I'm telling you.
She pulls it off?
She does.
All right. Gotta read it.
She does. And that's just the start. So this one's on Carlo Acutis, and then the next one is going to be, a girl with boy problems and father problems coming to know Saint Joseph. And then there's a child who gets in a complete terrible wreck, probably going to be disabled for the rest of his life. He comes to know Margaret of Castello,
yeah,
who Pope Francis just canonized. This woman who was born blind and hunchbacked and so on. I mean, this is dealing, and then there's going to be one about and these children end up knowing each other at school. So now their experiences start to overlap and intersect. Yeah. And now there's a communion of saints, if you want to call it.
On this plane, on this level as well.
Yes. I mean,
not just vertically, but horizontally.
Yes. And so that is so beautiful, the way that she unfolds all of this. I'm telling you, these books, I'm very excited about these books. And the first one is going to be coming out in the fall.
I'm looking forward to seeing these books. Teens are just dealing with so much right now. I like that these books express that no matter what my circumstances are, no matter how dark, I'm not alone in them. I have friends in high places. That's good, Vivian. What else?
Now, on a lighter note, another series I'm really excited about is this Seek and Find series, where it's kind of like a Catholic Where's Waldo. If you guys remember Where's Waldo,
yeah.
You're looking for these characters in these pictures, and there's just a paragraph of text about the picture, and it has something to do with the Catholic faith. So we have the life of Jesus. We have the lives of the apostles. We have the lives of saints. We have the one that's coming out in the fall is On the Way to Santiago de Compostela.
That's marvelous.
And the
Who are you
children
looking for on the way?
Well, it's set in the Middle Ages.
Uh-huh.
So what you're getting to know is like, what was the pilgrimage like back then when this became a big, big thing? I mean, pilgrims would walk to Santiago de Compostela from all over Europe. When the Holy Land became inaccessible, pilgrim sites in Europe became much more important. And so anyway, gosh, you learn all kinds of things. Like you learn about bandits in the woods, they're a problem. And you learn about, the hostels that were built along the way to give places for the pilgrims to stay. And you learn about the monks who also opened their doors to pilgrims. And yeah, it's really super cool. And in the spring, we're going to have Mont Saint Michel, also set in the time when it was a big pilgrimage site. These are fun books. I mean, I wish we were on video so that you could see just how fun these are, like check it out.
Oh man.
Check it out. And you're looking
for
these kids in every page, they show you on the bottom of the page the people you're looking for.
Oh, got it. Okay.
You're looking for these people in all of this. And then the text is very simple. So like, here's this text. A pilgrimage is a journey to a sacred place. For hundreds of years, pilgrims have walked to the tomb of St. James the Apostle in Spain. The emblem of pilgrims on the way of St. James is the seashell. Now, didn't you just learn a ton of stuff in one little paragraph? So these books are for ages 5 and up. And my granddaughter, who's 5, one of my grandkids, who's 5 years old, she loves these books. And I hear parents now, they're sending emails to Ignatius Press. When is the next Seek and Find book coming up? So
nice. Oh, that's
yeah. So those have proved to be very, very, very popular. We're also getting into graphic novels, and we've got one on Carlo. Speaking of Carlo Acutis, this is what's coming up. This just was released in the spring. We've got one on the Swiss Guard. We've got one on the
because everybody wants to know about Swiss Guards. Why are they dressed that way? When did they start protecting the Vatican?
And the whole history.
Why are they dressed that way again?
Yeah. The whole history of how they were Swiss mercenaries who began protecting the Pope in, 1500s or something, and kept on. And they're still, they are trained as elite forces. They are elite forces trained just like, Army Rangers and people like that. Huh. And so the book, it's done in the graphic novel style, right? So it's super easy for kids to read on their own. Boys are going to love the Swiss Guard book, okay? Because it goes through not only the history of the Swiss Guard, but you follow an imaginary person who goes through the training, and you learn that they have to be Swiss. They have to be practicing Catholics. Used to be you had to be from an aristocratic family, but I don't think you have to be anymore. Super cool, right? These are super cool books. I'm very excited.
I'm wondering next, if you would be willing, tell me what children's books are your favorite?
Well, gosh, I mean, as far as like what children's literature do I adore? I mean, I've got the same list everybody else does, all the great, Heidi and the Little House books. I love the Little House on the Prairie books. And my kids love them. We read them out loud to them. And the Chronicles of Narnia, loved those. Oh, well, so some series. So I have this 5-year-old granddaughter, and she's learning to read. And so I went through and found, because I've got boxes and boxes of books. I've got books all over the house. I got boxes and boxes in the basement, most of the kids' books. So I was rummaging through to find which books would I like this grandchild who's moving into easy chapter books. Okay, Betsy and Tacy. It's a wonderful series. The Away Goes Sally, which became a whole series. Astrid Lindgren, who did Pippi. She also did.
I loved Pippi when I was little. I was Pippi for Halloween with hair that straight out.
Perfect. Did you know about her Children of Noisy Village books?
I do know of it. I have not read it.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. They're just, writing for children used to be so wholesome and yet real. Like the Little House books deals with real things. Those were autobiographical of the author, Laura Ingalls Wilder. So when we say wholesome, we don't mean, this is just a bunch of sad saps, boring, No, these deal with real life, but this cloud of despair is not hanging over these stories. This cloud of despair that I described earlier.
Right. It's not as if this cloud of despair somehow makes books more real. I think the wholesomeness you mentioned is actually healthier.
There was just something about the atmosphere of these books. Hilda von Stockham, which, by the way, I don't know if your listeners know about the Bethlehem books, but they've been publishing out of print fiction for youth now for decades. And Ignatius Press actually helped them with get their publishing underway. Bethlehem books, they've got just scores of fabulous novels for young people that in the day that they were published, they were not published as Christian books.
Right. They were just good books.
They were just good books published by Viking and Random House. And, and these are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stories.
I really enjoy Hilda van Stockham's Irish trilogy about Francie,
yes.
Francie on the Run. Pegeen, I think, is one of them.
Yes, The Cottage of Bantry Bay is the first one.
That's
those are fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. And Hilda van Stockham, she had children of her own. And she has this interesting background. She married an ambassador, I think German, is the story. Perhaps? She's Dutch.
Dutch, okay.
And she grew up in Nazi-occupied Holland, by the way. And so her Winged Watchman, which is set in that era, and The Borrowed House, which is set in that era. These are amazing stories. I mean, talk about, people think that stuff that was published before was overly sentimental or overly watered down. And not at all. She's dealing with Nazi occupation. Hello. She's dealing with kids risking themselves to work in the resistance. Oh, The Book Thief. That's a recent book, totally secular, set in, it's a Nazi occupied country. The Book Thief. Anyway, the reason why I know about it is because my married daughter with children, she said, Mom, you got to read this book. So I did. That's not Christian or Catholic, or it's a secular publisher. It is a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Of the same time period. See how that association is working in my brain? There it goes again. Okay. You just have to be discerning. You used that word before, discerning. And there are a lot of people coming to the fore. Bethlehem Books have been doing this for decades now. They're finding out of print stuff done by secular publishers that's still worth reading. It was worth reading then. It's worth reading now. And I encourage anyone to go to their website and see what they've got. Alan French, who wrote Rolf and the Viking Bow, The Red Keep. These were done by secular publishers in their day. Yeah. They weren't considered Christian literature for kids, right? Okay, so another book I'd like to recommend, if I may. I know this is this was one long advertisement for Ignatius Press and our associates, but we published a book called Before Austin Comes Aesop by Sherry Blomquist. Okay, and she goes through the secular great books for children canon. And the reading lists in the back are worth the price of the book. But she also gives all kinds of tips for reading with children. And if you happen to be tutoring children at home, different projects you can give them and ways to go about introducing them to harder and harder works. She thinks that older kids should be still reading picture books if they're good, if they enjoy them. I still like picture books. And when I'm with my grandchildren, I mean, oh my gosh, we spend hours and hours reading together picture books. I want to emphasize that you cannot read enough to your children. Even older kids love to be read to.
Right.
And it brings the family together. It broadens their horizons, their imaginations, way more than anything they're going to find on a tablet or a phone. And they start to learn empathy, because they start to see human experience outside of their own and start to enter vicariously into these other people's lives and feel what they feel and want their good. I mean, this is developing actually your child's, not only their intellect, it's actually developing their heart if you read good literature to them. And then when they ask you questions like, Mommy or Daddy, why did that happen? Why did that person do that? Things like that.
Now it becomes more apparent and attractive when you have the distance between a reader and a book. Somehow there's a way of slowing things down and being able to see the good for what it is. And then also when a character makes immoral decision, like a morally poor choice or questionable, and your child says, why did they do that? Like they could have done something else. Like the irrationality of evil also becomes apparent to the child.
That's right. That is right. Now, the other thing that can happen too is the glorification of evil and making evil look attractive. And, if you want a barometer of discernment for which books not to read or which movies not to watch, Ask yourself this question. Was something evil made to look good?
Right. We're singing off the same hymn sheet, Vivian.
And not just in the initial, of course, that's what temptation is. We are duped into thinking that something evil is good and we do it. That's what temptation is. That's what fall and sin are. Okay. But the question is, does the reality of that act ever get revealed in the story? Or was evil made to look good? The person chose evil, and then you get to the end of the story, it turns out they actually got rewarded for doing it.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, that is a problem. That is a problem book. That is a problem movie. That is a problem. Stay away. That's going to worm its way into your mind the way seduction does. And so, no, we have to exercise discernment, especially when we're raising our kids, but for ourselves too, because we are all a work in progress. Our children are works in progress, and so are we. And, it's like the swinging door between the kitchen and the dining room. 1 minute you've swung the door open, you're on that side, and you're like, oops, this is miserable. I think I'll go back the other way. But somehow I end up on the other side of the door quite frequently in the course of the day, and I got to go back. Okay, we're all doing this all the time. And so we need help. We need help in forming our minds, forming our consciences, forming our hearts to want the good, be attracted by the good, love the good, and do the good.
Vivian, you just said one of my favorite things, that's why literature is so important, is that it shapes our desire to love the good, our desire to do the good, to participate intimately in it. Vivian, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for all the work that you do at Ignatius Press, Ignatius Press Magnificat.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it very much, and I wish you well on this work that you're doing. This is such important work to help families give their children good things.
I'm going to try to link in the show notes all the books that Vivian and I discussed in our conversation in the show notes of this podcast. So that's going to be a really rich resource for you.